Welcome to our study. Today we'll look at the last subtopic under quadratic equation, which is solving a quadratic equation using completing square. So I have 7 steps here to follow, which I will explain using the examples. So remember that the quadratic equation is of the form ax squared plus bx plus c, and in this case equal to 0 when we are solving using the quadratic equation as well as completing the square. So in case your equation is not arranged like this, ensure that it's properly arranged. After that, check the coefficient of x squared. Check what you have for a. If your a is 1, as in example 1, then you straight away go to the second step, which I will explain. If your a is any other number besides 1, then divide throughout by a before you go to step number 2. So our a in this case is 1, so straight away we go to step 2. In step 2, we have to move the constant term which we have here to the right hand side. So we're going to have x squared minus 3x is equal to 10. Now the 10 has come on the right hand side. After we do that, we get half of the coefficient of x. Let me call this equation 1. So we get half of the coefficient of x and square it. So let's solve that one. We get half times -3, because the coefficient of x is -3. Always be mindful of the sign, never leave it out. Then we square it, and this will give us -3 over 2 squared. After we get this term, we come back to equation 1 and add this term on the right hand side as well as on the left hand side. So equation 2 will now become x squared minus 3x plus, we add this term here, minus 3 over 2 squared is equal to 10. We add it also on the right hand side, minus 3 over 2 squared. What we have here on the left hand side is another quadratic equation, which when factorized was simplified to x minus 3 over 2 squared. And yes, you don't need to solve it. The simple way is getting the x squared without the squared. Just have the x as it is here. You get this term that you've added without the square as well, but including the sign. So we get the -3 over 2, which is what I have here. You put these 2 in one bracket, then square them. That's this equation on the left hand side factorized, and this is equal to, you're going to have 10. When I square a negative, I get a positive, and 3 squared is 9 over 2 squared is 4. So simplifying that, we're going to have x minus 3 over 2 squared is equal to, let me make this one over 1, and we're going to have the common denominator is 4. 1 into 4 is 4 times 10 will give us 40, plus 4 into 4 is 1, and 1 times 9 is 9, and this will give us x minus 3 over 2 squared is equal to 49 over 4. What you want is to find x. So since what we have inside the brackets is squared, we get the square root on both ends. We're going to have x minus 3 over 2 is equal to the square root of 49 over 4. But don't forget to have plus or minus all the time just in front of the square root, because there are 2 possible answers here. So after that, we have x is equal to, we get the 3 over 2 to the other side, it's negative this side, becomes positive, we're going to have 3 over 2 plus or minus. Laws of indices allow us to write this as square root of 49 over square root of 4. And this is equal to x is equal to 3 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 49 is 7 over the square root of 4 is 2. So now I want to find the exact possible values of x. So we're going to have x is equal to 3 over 2. It's plus or minus, so we can either add. That's plus 7 over 2. And this will give us 5. Or instead of adding, we can subtract. So we're going to have x is equal to 3 over 2 minus 7 over 2, which will give us a minus 2. So you'd have solved using completing the square. So for our second example, solve the quadratic equation and then leave your answer correct to 2 decimal places. So what we have is 40 squared plus 80 minus 1. Let's look at our a, the coefficient of t squared. It's not 1. So before we start calculating or following those stages, let's ensure that we have t squared have the coefficient of 1. And we do that by dividing throughout the equation by the coefficient of t squared, which we have. We divide throughout by a. So then we're going to have 40 squared over 4 plus 8t over 4 minus 1 over 4 is equal to 0 over 4. So then this simplifies to t squared minus 2t minus 1 over 4 is equal to 0. Now we have t squared having a coefficient of 1. After we do that, we move the constant term to the right hand side. Then we're going to have t squared minus 2t is equal to 1 over 4. We have our equation 1. Now whatever follows, we use equation 1. So now we get that term which we're adding on both ends by getting half of the coefficient of t at this stage and squaring it. So we're going to have half of negative 2, then we square it. This is going to be half times negative 2 is negative 1, then we square negative 1. So this is the term we are adding on equation 1 on both sides. So our equation now becomes t squared minus 2t plus, we add this term, negative 1 squared is equal to 1 over 4 plus negative 1 squared. So now this term here again, we get the t without the square. We're just going to have t. We get what we added from this stage here, the half of the coefficient of t squared. We get it without the square as well. So you have negative 1 there. Then we square these together in one bracket. So t minus 1 squared is equal to 1 over 4. When I square negative 1, I'm going to have a positive 1. So we have t minus 1 squared is equal to, simplifying this will give us 5. Will give us 5 over 4. Again, we want to find t, so we get the square root on both ends. We're going to have t minus 1 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 5 over 4. and it's going to be t minus 1 is equal to plus or minus square root of 5 is 2.2361. So the question says correct two decimal places for your final answer. So before the final answer, please write at least 4 decimal places over 2, and this is t minus 1 is equal to plus or minus 1.1180. Again, we move the negative 1 to the other side so we can find the possible values of t. We're going to have t is equal to 1 plus or minus 1.1180, and this implies t is equal to 1 plus 1.1180, and this will give us 2.1180, but they need the final answer to 2 decimal places. So we're going to have 2.1, we are cutting here so that we can have 2. 8 is above 5, so add 1 to this one, 1, 2. Or our other possible answer is t is equal to 1 minus 1.1180, and this will give us negative 0.1180, and this is approximately negative 0.12. That's correct to 2 decimal places, and you are done. Thank you.